What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Dig It podcast. I'm your host, Drew Walsh, and today we got guest Coach Austin Wasserman of High Level Throwing in the house. This is going to be fun because Coach Austin's someone who I've been following for several years now, and from a throwing standpoint, I've always been the coach who understood that infield play, you had to be a dynamic thrower. You had to be able to make several different throws from several different slots, right? The game calls for it, but Coach Austin's someone who's really put a practical application to everything that I was always seeking, right? Like I knew infielders had to be able to throw from different slots. Coach Austin has put together the high level throwing program that, guys, it is such a game changer for baseball and softball. And I'm so excited to unpack how you even got to the high level throwing program. Coach Austin, thank you so much for joining.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate that, man.
Of course, of course. So if we could just go through whatever timeline you want of just like your background, you're involved with baseball, strength and conditioning, and we have a lot of similarities with that, which is cool. So unpack that a little bit. I think it's important for our listeners just to hear a journey. They may have a similar one. They may never thought that was a thing, and it could open doors.
Sure. No, I'd be glad to share some things with everybody. And it didn't start out as me wanting to be a throwing coach. Like that was not my dream. It was want to be a Major League Baseball strength coach. Like I was interested in movement and strength. And I just never thought I'd be teaching athletes and coaches how to throw because I just thought everybody knew, and it was a skill that, it's just a skill that everybody, knew what to do. And it's like, who am I to come and teach someone to throw? And it just kind of accidentally, honestly happened. It was, I just kind of give you a quick background. I grew up in New Hampshire. I'm originally from New York. Played baseball, basketball, football.
Are you a huge Pat fan, Coach?
I just, I'm from Brooklyn, so I just like football, man. I just like.
All right, we can move forward now. We can move forward with this podcast.
We can move forward. All right. No, my dad played, football in high school against the Incredible Hulk, Lou Ferrigno. So he's a little scat back, like 5'3". So
that's awesome.
Anyway, so I thought I was going to play football, and obviously I like baseball, but I grew up in New Hampshire, played sports there, went to college, went to University of New Orleans, played baseball there. I ended up transferring before Hurricane Katrina hit, so I kind of got obviously lucky. A lot of my friends had to transfer and go other places. So I played baseball there for 2 years, transferred to UConn, got into their kinesiology program, played for Coach Penders for a couple of years, and it was an incredible experience, like just a phenomenal environment. It was really great, to be around that. And then, of course, the academic side, like you get into the kinesiology program at UConn, it's pretty big. So there's some really good professors there that mentored me and, really taught me some things that, I think helped me along the way as I grew and matured and evolved as a performance coach. So I had a really good background and a good base already. And so after college, I tried to play professional baseball. I played independent ball, just delaying life for a while, just trying to figure it out. I played for the Worcester Tornadoes and then Nashua Pride, and played for a couple of years, and again just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So after that, I actually ended up getting a job in New York City as an assistant physical therapist, which was basically just like a personal trainer, strength coach, or just an assistant to a physical therapist, working with athletes, general population, just all sorts of, clients. Roger Goodell was actually one of the clients there. So I get to stretch him. Chad Muska, the professional skateboarder, he was there. A lot of the big, I think Julius, Dr. J's daughter was a professional tennis player, and I got to train her. So it was just really cool, not baseball, softball, just different sports, a lot of tennis, racquetball, a lot of runners, if you think about New York, a lot of basketball players. So it's just, that's what I was dealing with. I didn't really work with baseball, softball in that realm, but I learned so much about the body, the injury, the progressions, the rehab, the prehab, like all that whole environment, and just kind of learned and took it all in. So actually I was there for 2 years in New York City and quit my job in 2008 to work with baseball and softball players back home in New Hampshire. So I was actually working in New York while I was like making this transition. Monday through Friday, then driving to New Hampshire Friday night, working with athletes Saturday, Sunday, just like renting a cage just to like teach them movement, med ball throws, like throwing drills, hitting, I did all that skill work Saturday, Sunday, then I would drive back Sunday night and then work Monday through Friday. So I did that for like 3 months before I actually quit my job in New York to have like a little clientele base. So I had like 8 athletes, nothing big, just working in a cage, like, hey, get your warm-ups here, like having it structured. And from there, it just, kind of grew. Like 8 kids became 16 and 16 became, 30. And then all of a sudden I have a small space and then I have a bigger space. And now things are happening. It's like, cool, I'm going to be a strength coach, like working with athletes. I love this. Like I'm on my path to being a major league strength coach. I got my CSCS, like I'm ready to rock. Like, here we go. And then, in this private business that I was doing, I wasn't doing any skill work other than like basic ground balls and like a little bit of like throwing warm-ups, but nothing like, oh, let me dive into this. It was just strength, movement. Let's see how you feel balls. Let's like see how you throw a little bit. And for the first probably 3 or 4 years of the business, and my business was just that. Like I wasn't, talking about high level throwing, but one day a mom brought her daughter to me and was like, can you teach her how to throw? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. Like it's no big deal. And I was like, that was so bad. Like, what is going on? It's like,
Yes.
I'm like, is this just in New Hampshire or is this just this athlete? Like she was 12 and she threw like same foot, same arm, same leg, which you do as, as a young kid. So I'm like, so I worked through this athlete. And then, a week later, a dad brought his son to me. He was like, you teach him how to throw. He's a pitcher. He's, he's an 11-year-old kid. Yes. Like perfect. Let's go. Like I play baseball. It's going to be easy. And it was like the ball, like flew straight up in the air. Like he was like throwing it like with his wrist this way. It was just like really unique patterns that I don't think I've ever seen before. And I'm like, the glove side didn't do anything. Like there was no stride, no hip movement. And I was like that's really bad. Like, all right, this must be New Hampshire. That's like, we're not developing these kids. So, I started to, this is like 2009, 10, 11, 12. And I just started to really write what I was seeing, like training my athletes, getting them on video, throwing, reading as much as I could, like calling doctors, orthos, PTs, like, athletic trainers, like, what are you seeing with your athletes? Can you provide me with, return to throwing protocols, like rehab, like, what do you guys do with your athletes? Because this is all new to me. And I was just, in this small facility in New Hampshire, like nobody knew who we were, cared about anything we were doing. It was just, here we are training. So, from there, it was like, how do I explore what's happening in throwing from my background, but also what these like doctors and orthos and PTs are telling me. But what I found was there was nothing that talked about patterning or like movements through positions during a skill, like, throwing. There was a lot of stuff on hitting. Obviously there was way more, but there wasn't anything like on throwing. And I remember like that, 5 or 6 phase throwing image of just like a still, drawing like black and white. And I was like, how can someone view this and like, oh, this is the position where I should get to, or this is how I should make my throw, on flat ground or down a mound. And there was just a lot of pieces missing. So I was just asking lots of questions and, kind of bridge the gap, I guess, between, overhand throwing development and rehab and, post-op athletes and things like that. So it really just, watching what the best movers do, reading research papers, like Coupe Duran, overload implements, like everything I could get my hands on. It was just like nothing was really out there that I could, talk to someone about. So I just created high level throwing. It really was just about how do we get athletes moving through these like checkpoints, because we were always like wrist flicks, L drills, and just very static. Like, how do you expect your athletes to like throw on the run, like at an angle, when you're just like having them like tap on the fence? And like, it was something that was taught to me by big leaguers. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, must be the way to do it. But then you watch them and they definitely don't get to there. They like move through positions effectively. And I was a big baseball card guy growing up. So I'm like seeing these like still images of like all these guys. I'm like, oh, is that how we're supposed to throw? Like, do we get there? And I'm like looking, I'm filming. I remember I got a video camera and I was like 10 or 11. I like set it up and started like throwing and hitting and using it and like trying to evaluate myself. And I was trying to figure out what I was doing because I was a little guy. Like I had to use my entire body to throw the ball. So, it was just lots of disconnections from researching and talking to people to, what I was actually seeing. So that's kind of where high level throwing was really born.
And that's just amazing you're in the industry, you played your whole life, and now you're at this point where you're like, all right, I really love strength and conditioning. I'll always be a baseball guy at heart. Mm-hmm. There's this glaring issue that I can't believe it's still a thing. Let's start to explore this. And it's so cool to just hear one or two clients kind of pave the way and just like open the door for you to come in and be such a huge part of a massive issue that, to be honest, it's gotten a lot better, I'd say, from like when I've started to look at your stuff and maybe years before that. It's still glaring, right? Like this game is about catch and throw, right? You got to be able to catch and throw. And throwing's not just take the ball and move it to another space. Mm-hmm. Man, there's so many nuances to it, and you can categorize it, right? Like you got outfielders who do their own thing. It's a little different arm pathway, maybe longer. You got pitchers who have more time, might be longer. That's evolving. Mm-hmm. And then infielders, if you're starting to talk about throws, it's just contextual to where am I going on the field, and then where's the ball going next, right? And how fast is this runner? How fast does that ball hit? What shape is that ball? How good are my hands? So there's so many different variables that go into it. And you're telling us they couldn't even throw standing on their 2 feet with no external feedback from the environment changing, right? Correct. So again, guys, this is so important. I'm so excited for you guys to be able to get exposure to Coach Austin's content. Some of the things you said really resonated with me when you identified, throwing same arm, same leg, and rolling wrist, and just patterns are how I see infielders, right? Positions and patterns. So when you said positions, if you could envision, remember when like Roadrunner ran and you'd see a lag behind him, right? You'd see like the almost like Roadrunner behind him, and then he would go forward. When I think of that, as far as infield play goes, like if I had a lag on an infielder, that's the path infielders have to travel to get through, to get to and through balls. And I think we taught it as like A gets to ball, gets to throw. Like, no, there's so many things that we have to unpack and how we arrive to in a position and leave a position. So that's so cool that you were able to see, like, listen, what does a static picture on a piece of paper do for me as an infielder, right? Like I can't relate to that.
And we're very visual too. Like, I'm a visual learner. So, seeing things versus, that moves and like that's a video versus obviously a still image, for me, like hearing things is harder for me to interpret and learn versus like seeing it and hearing it at the same time. So, athletes, if your coach is demonstrating incorrectly or they're not showing you the right people doing it, it's, athletes are going to be very visual and trying to imitate that type of movement. So you just have to be careful, of your own, demonstrations, as a coach, just because kids will, they will 100%, try and mimic you. So, yeah.
Yes. And that's true. Even on the strength and conditioning side, right? Like all my mentors always told me, hey, make sure whatever you're trying to teach an athlete, you understand the movement inside and out, and you could perform it. Does it have to be perfect? Probably not, but like it's got to be good enough to look like the pattern. And when I was coaching in college, the biggest glaring thing for me to start F.A.S.T ID was when we would go to a showcase, and part of the segment was infielders would break out with the infield coach, and they would start with dailies, right? All the infielders would line up on the line. Their partners would be 10 feet in front of them. They would roll each other ground balls from a fielding position. And that's, to us, is just a squat. That's part of a level change action that humans do. And like I mentioned to you earlier, 99% of the squats were awful. So that's just going to cause a cascade of issues as me as an infielder, inability to move through and in and through positions. So what are some of the biggest things when you head out to a clinic? What are some of the biggest patterns if you're just watching girls warm up or guys warm up? What are some things you see right away as like, all right, that's where we're starting?
Yeah. So first off, I identify athletes in a couple different ways, and I look at the different components. We have 4 components of high level throwing, which is like the arm pathway and the arm shape. So, how does the arm move back to load? How does it transition? What is like the shape between the upper arm and the forearm? As the arm is moving through, ball release, whether you're like bare hand, backhand on the run, like up the middle, whatever it is, like when your arm starts that initiation back, like double play, that's the pathway. And then the shape again is like, what is this shape, this angle as you're like loading back and as you're transitioning through the zone.
So for listeners that don't know, like the shape is just think about your bicep bone, the humerus, and then your forearm bone, right? And then where your wrist is. That's what coach is talking about.
Correct. So I'm looking at that because I feel like athletes, it's easy for them to visually see like their arm pathway. It's like, oh, I do this, or like, oh, I do this, or like, oh, I point my wrist so far out. It's really easy to see that happening. So I think it's an easier adjustment to make. So there's some arm pathway and shape is the first thing that I look at. I'll kind of explain which was like some of the ones that are more drastic and like the ones that, are most common. But that's what I look at.
They all affect each other, right?
They all affect each other. If your arm pathway isn't synced up with your stride, there's some things happening. So arm pathway shape is number 1. Number 2 is like the hip to trunk relationship, basically separation. Like, are your hips like rotating towards the target as your torso, is loading back? And of course, the timing of that is going to be dependent on the situation, runner, all those things you mentioned, of course. So like, is this athlete like really rotating, or are they like sliding and pushing, and are they losing, direction of their ball, or obviously like velocity, and then the third one is lead arm, like front side, like lead arm patterning. Like, what is that glove side supposed to do? And there's so many variations because all dependent. Like if you catch it up here versus here, like the glove is going to move differently. So that's the third like component. And then the fourth component is transfer of energy, essentially, like lead leg patterning. Does your lead leg, when impact the ground, does it stabilize your body enough for like your upper body to rotate, your arm to accelerate, to release? And is that lead leg like turned in too much? Like, do you have lead hip problems? Are you, not striding far enough? Are you not, I'm thinking of like double plays, like actually infield, like transferable, movement. So, obviously you can just do like a shuffle throw and get some really good information on an athlete, but then you go to like, let me see what your on the run throw looks like. Now you can get more detailed with those components. So obviously you want to get general first. These are the things that I look at. And then I position like middles, corners, like that. So that's what I look at first, those 4 components. And, I know we talked about it a little bit before. There's some like arm action stuff that is very common in terms of like how the arm loads back, but also how the arm moves through the throwing zone to ball release. And then, there's some pretty standard like hip issues and, like front side buckling and, stuff like that we can talk about moving forward. But that's,
for the sake of this conversation, because we'll have to have 4 more podcasts to go through all the different lanes and slots. Let's just say
what do you want to focus on?
I think I always say, like, I think every thrower needs to be able to throw from the standard 90 or inside 90 a little bit, like just having a catch from 40, 50 feet, be able to get backspin. And it's got to be rhythmic and with the rest of the body, the feet, yada, yada, yada. So like, I think that throw is like where we have to start, because that's our squat of strength and conditioning, our foundation where we branch out from.
Totally. So we'll do, like in the high level throwing program, we have obviously our warm-ups, like dynamic warm-ups, movement and mobility, just options for kids to do, like thoracic spine stuff. Like maybe you're hypermobile and you don't need it, like explore it, but just, don't go crazy with it. Maybe your hips are really tight and you can benefit from some, basic like 90-90 transitions and basic like hip internals, just basic things. So that's in there. And then we start with like 3 foundational throwing drills, and all of our throwing drills start from like different setups to feel how the shoulder blade moves on the rib cage. Meaning, like we were kind of talking about it a little bit earlier, like the ball is not the loading focus. Like your shoulder blade like sets the shoulder joint and allows like your arm to actually transition the way it's supposed to transition. So when we're doing our setups, like we're either starting just center chest, as if we like got a ground ball and we're going to kind of load the arm back, or we'll do like different setups. We call it an arm behind setup, which initially I started this arm behind setup. You've probably seen it, like some of our basic drills, like ridiculous, like what the frick is this guy doing? Is like elbows up, balls behind it, like the neck. And it's like, I used to post on like high school baseball web, like just getting information, seeing what people were needing and interested in. And I was just, helping people out and like discuss fast pitch forums on like all those softball, forums back in, early, like late 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. And it was just like, I was trying to help as many people as possible.
Sure.
And, you get all these, comments and things like that. But the whole purpose is to spark new ideas and get creative with how you load the arm and how you create good movement patterns. So we'll start, we did this crazy thing, and it was really just to feel the elbow staying above the shoulder, because most of the athletes I was working with were just like pushing the ball and they're like wrist flicks and they go to throw and they don't know how to like unravel the arm properly. And that's, the loading pattern is one thing, but you can have an amazing load pattern, but how you unravel your arm, is something that we'll talk about in a little bit. So we'll go here. We'll start like either by the ear, resting on the shoulder, and then just feel the arm loading back using the torso. Like it's not just like jamming your shoulder blade back. It's blended movements of torso rotation, like glove side movement, however, whatever you play determines it, and then how your arm loads back via your shoulder blade. So there's kind of 3 infield patterns that I've seen and I've identified, and you've probably seen a lot of common like loading patterns. And I'm sure you've seen a loading pattern where like just the arm is just kind of like this way where it transitions up. That's a variation that happens. Like I know I get questions like, well, should it be here? Should it be here? Like, where should it be? It's just, again, it's going to be dependent on like where the ball is in the situation. But there's a variation here. There's a variation where it's just like that 45-degree angle of the forearm loading back, which is very clean and allows like the shoulder blade to load efficiently. This does as well. It's just might get a little stickier when you're transitioning. Right. And then there's another variation where it's like more vertical, like just not at like less than 90, but like right at 90 to make their throw. So those variations.
Can we stop on the third one? Like we call that like breaking out into an L right away. And I feel like traditionally that's been a little more correlated with catchers, right? Like back here, and the ball is up already. Like catchers are told like ball to ear and your palms facing the earth. Have you seen like, and that's the thing, man. There's every person you coach is different. So if they're having success by way of no pain and good outcome and good metrics, like I don't think it's necessarily wrong, right? Like, so let's roll with it and develop it and make sure that's efficient by way of your lower half, right? So
lots of
have you seen anything here? Does this have any like, is this, you're seeing a lot of success there? And guys, if you're listening, I pulled the ball back. I'm more in like an L position and my wrist is facing forward or I'm in an L. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. No, so it's interesting. It's like you have to see what their injury history is. You have to see what their throwing pattern looks like. You have to know those pieces of information. Are they throwing the ball away? Like, are they missing, high and away, or is the ball going up? Is it going down? What's their, velocities? What's their hip, what are their hips doing? So, catchers, infielders honestly are very, similar, like, to like
100%.
from a shortstop, like getting a ball from second base and turning a double play. Like, it's pretty similar to like catchers coming out of the crouch to make a throw, like very similar pathways. So, I mean, I've seen success with a small, shorter angle. I've seen success with a 90-degree angle, like kids that throw 95 plus and kids that throw 95 plus from here. Like, it all relates to the timing of your body and the element, and obviously the components, like, are you strength training? Like, what's your volume of throwing? There's all those things. So, just focusing on one as an athlete, as a baseball player, a softball player, it's obviously you can't do that. You need these different pieces.
Back to the catching thing. The biggest difference I see with youth catchers, pros do whatever they want. They're so talented, so strong.
Yeah.
But what happens is if I'm working with a catcher who also is an infielder, and yeah, they have a short arm action, fantastic, but they usually throw from the right side of their body. Like, the ball starts on their right shoulder. So I'm like, I don't know. Does that feel that loose to you? No. All right. Can we break middle? Like, but it's so hard because the ball's coming in. They're trying to get the ball out so quick, and it just they're a little bit delayed, and it starts there. And if you just do it right now, it's tight. Do you have any problem with that? Are you like, nah?
No, you just have like catchers will have to get a little bit deeper versus infielders. And again, it's like you just have, if you have that athlete that's a catcher infielder, you just have to make that adjustment. But yeah, catchers are going to have a little bit deeper transfer, versus an infielder. Again, like if they're fielding a ground ball versus, again, like turning a double play, they're not going to be like so far back.
That's a great point.
Unless they're like a back end in the hole and they have time to like. So again, I think those pieces too, like, are important to know as as an infielder or coach, like your arm pathway, the timing of how fast it goes back, can change, and that's okay.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. Arm pathway. Boom. We're working through shapes and pathways, and we'll keep it more infield catcher related. We're going to see shorter arm pathways, correct?
Sure. And that just means like your elbows bent as you load back versus like your arm extended. Exactly.
Creating a bigger circle, right? It's going to be more circular with your elbow versus the wrist, right? And then now where are we moving through?
So, do you want to talk about like glove side stuff? Because that's what I kind of see. But let me say one more thing about the arm pathway. So we kind of touched upon like how we load back. The biggest issue, I think, actually one of the biggest issues I see, I think mostly it's a big issue in softball because there are a lot of hypermobile athletes and softball players that aren't strong enough at that like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Not to say that baseball kids aren't too, because we see this in baseball quite a bit as well. But in baseball, everyone starts to throw overhand. In softball, every one of your athletes are learning how to pitch first. So their patterns when they throw are really awkward, and they're almost like up, and then they collapse the forearm to then make their throw. So there's obviously ball size too, with like is we can talk about that as well, but like all athletes, on the softball side need to learn how to overhand throw first, because that's going to allow them to learn like the hip to trunk relationship, their shoulder blade, like how their arm should be released, like lots of like lead leg stability, so that when they go to pitch, they're not just like flying open when you see the little kids and they're starting to pitch that way, which is fine, totally fine. But like, let's teach them to overhand throw too, because when they get to that like 11, 12, 13, we're seeing this really weird pattern, meaning they could have a very good load, they transition, but since athletes were taught wrist flicks,
I just threw up.
The body is thinking that I have to have my elbow get past my body
yes,
to release the ball. versus allowing my torso to carry my arm into external rotation before the forearm like unravels on time. So there's not like this like push pattern. There's like a really good like unravel pattern with the arm. And that's why the arm behind setup helps scapular patterning and loading, but also how the forearm and the elbow like unravel, your arm pronate, like turns in, pronates, and rotate, and your torso rotates your ball, and like decelerates your arm. So that is a huge issue with wrist flicks, because you're teaching a kid to release the ball like way out in front of their body versus allowing their like torso to basically create and carry the arm through shoulder external rotation and through ball release. So that is a big issue. I know in infield, like as we get to angle throws, that elbow is like it's going to slip forward a little bit because that's fine. Like you're getting into a different slot. Like I'm kind of like up here, but
right.
So like, and when you have like athletes, I don't know if you ever work with them and you do a carrier angle. Have you ever done that with your athletes?
What would that look like, coach?
So like you would just have them stand up and just put their arms out and basically see the angle between the upper arm and the forearm. And some athletes like are
hyper or
very hypermobile.
Yes.
So like their elbow might slip a little bit more because they're already like in that position. You can look it up, carrying angle. Females have a little bit greater carrying angle, but I've worked with some males that have like their elbow is like out here when they just rest.
Is that just a lack of dynamic stability, or is it just the joint setup?
It's just like a couple things, like where the humeral head is like positioned. Like some arms, like if you rest their arm down, like some thumbs are straight, some are a little tilted. So it's just like where it's positioned and their anatomy. So just resting, you might have some that have more of a carrier angle. So just be aware of that. Like, oh, this girl's elbow's like always in front. Well, like she's 11, she's hypermobile, like her arm goes all the way back. She hasn't, learned how to stabilize yet. Like, let's do some like smaller, low effort throws to build her back up, strengthening the shoulder, learning how to pattern, do some different things before we're like, okay, go long toss and like play 104 games this year, so
yes,
the same with baseball too as well. It's like we need to focus on the development and the care. Anyways, it's another topic, but
yes, it comes down to positions, pathways, right? Like if you have someone who's struggling, you have to rewire, you have to create new habits, bring awareness, and that's why you do drills that may. And to all the coaches that might be hating this, that, the other, it is what it is. Like you're out here trying to innovate and you're trying to create like drills, create skills. So if you have someone whose elbow is dropping really low, and we know we don't want that for the betterment of their health, I tell kids, like if you're doing something ridiculous, like flipping your glove last second, we'll go something completely exaggerative opposite to give you awareness. Like, do I want you to hold your glove out in front of you? Never. Do I want you to flip it? No. You're like, or your timing's awful. So you have to exaggerate skills for the brain to build awareness of these circuits with the rest of their body.
Exactly. We're not like fielding a ball and put it behind the head. It's just to feel these like movements of your body that you might not have felt before, and to give you like, of course, we're going to throw like a normal person, like step and throw. And it's like, why do you have your right leg forward, and why do you do all these different setups? And it's really just to explore your own body's range of motion, really. And how far can you go with this? Oh, let me pull that back a little bit. How far can my shoulder blade move on the rib cage? Oh, that feels good. Like, how do these things feel when I'm exploring these different movements, and movements through the throwing skill? So yeah.
And there's a link from every joint from the ground up. And sometimes there's one or two that are wrong, or maybe it's a timing thing. It could be a improper pathway that you got to use a drill like that off the tool belt to help bring awareness to and timing. So I love that you put up the wrist flips, coach.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny. I wrote an article, I think 2011 or 12, and it was why wrist flicks suck and why all your players have elbow pain, and like why L drills are terrible. And I did it just to spark conversation. Really, it was like I was working with these athletes and they weren't doing what I wanted them to do, and I was teaching them like I did the same thing.
Yes, I've done
And
it.
then I'm
I'm
like,
guilty.
me too. And I'm like rolling them ground balls. All right, infield. And like, all right, let's roll on the run. I'm like, how are they going to throw a ball on the run if they don't even know how to like move properly, like baseball and softball? So like that's where kind of came from. So yeah.
And that's the thing. I'm a coach who loves coaches who are trying to create and take risks and be bold and do things that look a little silly and get a couple get a couple comments that seem pretty angry. It's like, well, dude, if you
Yeah.
got time to come to my page, look at my video, and then drop a comment of hate, I feel bad for you. You have you got some
Right.
pain going
It's
on.
just about education. Like we're trying to help kids and coaches, and it, they're what we post, is just like where they're at that point in time. Like they're working through things, and it's like we're just trying to show
Yeah.
other kids, like, hey, if you're a 4'9", like 80-pound kid, like you can do these movements too and be successful over time. So, yeah.
That's one of the things that I will I don't step in much because I'm incredibly flexible in the way I coach different athletes.
Sure.
But if they do that one thing, it's not like I yell at them, but I'll come over there and I'll just exactly what you said. I'll explain exactly why I think it'll put them in a really poor position to throw over time and create really bad pathways. And I hey, you ever save a Microsoft document on a computer? Yeah. Okay. Well, every time you do that throw, you're saving it there and strengthening that being a primary go-to option. Do we want that? No. I was just told to do it and that's okay. Like, let's just continue to move past that.
Sure.
I love that.
Lots of schools of thought, and that's okay. It's taking little pieces of things that could potentially help you. Like maybe your arm pathway needs work, and maybe your lower half is phenomenal. Like, everything your hip is moving, or at like 55, or 65, and it's like you get your arm pathway, all of a sudden you're 70, 75, or 60, 60. So, maybe your lead leg is a little weak, and that's something that is worked upon in different ways, from strengthening to skill work. So for sure.
Let's get back to the standard throw. Let's talk more about lead arm, like its responsibilities, what it does, what you want it to do, what you see it doing.
Yeah. Lead arm for me is basically a way for the throwing arm, like giving it time to actually load back, but also to allow the torso, like to help the torso create direction towards a target. Like allowing your torso to rotate effectively will allow your thoracic spine, which is like the middle portion of your spine, to work the right way, which will allow your arm to sink into external rotation. So like, I feel like glove side movement has two pieces. Is to like allow the arm to load back, but then allow the torso to rotate effectively and allow like the arm to clear effectively. So with that being said, what is the lead arm supposed to do in like a normal throw? Like, again, it's like you have some thumbs down, you have some like just glove even, you have some like weird like fingertips up to out, which I see more with softball players than baseball players. I mostly see like more like elbow in baseball players and like thumb working down with the glove side, which is fine. And then I've seen different ways the glove moves. So I use the terms clear or fold or peel around like towards your body. Because if you're
use tuck too, tuck clear.
Tuck is fine. I think the thing that I got into trouble with when I was telling them to like pull the glove to their chest was I wasn't creating, turn this way, I wasn't creating like good thoracic rotation and like good movement. I was just like forcing like forward flexion.
I love that. I'm fired up about that because I'll do this and I'll clear my left elbow of my torso and I'll ask hey, does that look like a clear or a tuck to you? And I just go off whatever they're saying and then watch to make sure they don't do that. And listeners, all we're saying is coach is separating his hands and then his left elbow, if he's a righty thrower, is getting outside of his torso to allow him to rotate not only through his hips, but also his thoracic spine. And what he's saying is sometimes throwers for the wrong throw will tuck their glove back into the middle of their chest and almost cause like an emergency brake, right? So it'll stop rotation because your hands are now stopping your chest from rotating. And that might be an elbow's opportunity to leak through because this became a braking force. But I do really like that glove side coming in when I'm going glove side with momentum, throwing uphill. If I'm going uphill, this has to be my braking force because of the tightness and compactness of my throw, right?
Correct.
If I go to clear, I'm flying open. I no longer have a front side. So that's where the nuances are like, oh, this like you wish it was so
play
easy.
Dependent. Exactly. I know. I think think about like you're a shortstop, run around first, like a ball hit to your right. It's like a double plate toss. Like that glove, like you said, is going to like work.
Decelerate.
Like, why would it go this way unless it takes a bad hop and it forces you to do that movement? So 100% agree with that, like where the glove is.
The standard throw is what we're talking about our front side. A ball, I'm a shortstop hitting a 5-5 hole on the run backhand. I have to reposition my feet, separate, and then clear. Those are the best throws I've ever felt or seen from any shortstop. Let's go. Tap them in.
100%. Like those are like my blackout throws. I call them blackout throws. Like I get a backhand and like everything is synced perfectly together. And it's just like
on a rope.
And I feel like with like those types of throws, like I'm just like your body, you're not thinking about your mechanics. You're not like aware of it. Like those are my blackout. Like some people have blackout swings. Like they're like barrel gets in the right path and they're like ball goes out and they're like, I didn't even know that. I didn't feel the ball off the barrel. Like those are my blackout.
That's your right knee down, left leg forward throwing drill, the hip reposition throw. Like that's what it's teaching.
Half nail turn and throw for sure. Yep.
So what I found, like from that throw, I'm like, okay, if that's my best throw backspun on a rope, which I need to have in the arsenal, I don't need to follow every throw. Like, why do I need to follow my throw if I could throw it max effort, max velocity on a line by rotating well? And for the front side, is exactly why you said it. We talked about our front side is boom, direction, right? Keeping shoulders, hips level, because a lot of kids go high, low, out. So it's direction like a laser to my target, right? It's balance. I love the timing for my separation on my backside with my arm. And then it accelerates my right hip through. Like the same thing, middle and fastball. And now we can get into braking forces, right? Like if I'm sitting fastball, I see changeup, I leak into my front side's soft, I'm going to fillet, I'm using all hands. There's a time and place for that throw, but if I collapse too early, I'm a wet noodle, right? And this is going to alter.
Yeah, your arm slot's going to change too, and that's where like the inconsistency of your throws could potentially lead to injury. With younger kids, it's like, well, young kids shouldn't throw curveballs. Well, yeah, because like every release point is like completely different. So like their release point is going to change every time. It's not as consistent. So they might like flare it out and like oh, that kind of hurt, and let me check it back in. But then they go back out because they don't have the control or proprioception yet. So
right.
They're kind of same idea too. It's like you want to get the basics first, but getting your basic drill work, your kind of stationary, and then you get to like your movement, your dynamic, specific infield type drills.
Coach, you're coming back on at least because I'm thinking about so many things to dive into throwing wise, because it's so nuanced and it's so important. Yeah. But let's start to get to a point where like throwing, you don't have to go too crazy on this, but like what should every infielder be doing when they warm up? And don't go into the warm-up stuff yet, because I think it's gonna be cool. Like I think they should have your tools, right? Like they should probably have the tools you have for warm-ups, but more so like the throwing side of things. Like if you do A and B every time you throw it decently, it's a good throwing program.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a couple things. There needs to be scapular patterning, like learning how your shoulder blade loads back. There needs to be some type of rotation movement. So whether you're doing like, I know it's kind of more of like a med ball slam or rotational movement, to prime your body to what you're going to be doing. And then I think there has to be foundational components and dynamic components. So starting, least intense to most intense, least complex to most complex. So I think, whether you do, a step and throw when you get out there, whether you do like staggered stance when you get out there, whether you do like hands here, like feet together, like whatever your setup is to start, like there needs to be a good progression of, low effort to high effort and just building up, because you need to feel how your arm is that day too. Like it could be completely like, oh, I'm gonna throw as hard as I can today, and you get out there and like the first couple throws, like, damn, my shoulder's a little sore, my back's a little sore. Like I'm gonna modify and change my volume a little bit, in this throwing progression or in this throwing session. So I think there has to be some type of scapular loading. There has to be some type of rotational movement, because you're going to get all those components: hip to trunk relationship, or the lead leg patterning, like how your arm loads, how your hips work, how your glove side is supposed to come in, and then just a basic like foundational movements to more dynamic, like obviously long toss and different like half kneeling turn and throws and angle throws, slot throws,
not
are
sidearm,
not sidearm,
angles.
Yeah. I always say, like, if I like put my arm out like this, my arms in line with my shoulders, I'm just changing the orientation of my torso to change my release point. So, whether it's like, back and forth, or like double play work, or, more specific to what you're going to be doing, whether it's an infield, like shortstop double play, second base double play starts, third base double play starts, so you can get as specific as you want. But I think there has to be those components in a throwing progression. So, and there's, it's just, build your own routine, take things that you like, from certain, movements and patterning and drill work, and make it your own, because everybody is different. Everyone's going to have different warm-up times, as they get older and as they, mature as an athlete. So
gold. This is more for coaches or even players. What habits have you instilled over the past, it could be 15, 20, your whole life, 5 months? You're like, I'd attribute this to the reason why I've achieved what I've achieved. Like, is there anything you're like, hey, this has been really successful, for whatever success means, that maybe you do daily?
I think it's just being good at customer service and helping as many people as possible. Like, I'm still doing what I'm doing 10, 15 years ago. It just, there's just more people that are liking this information and using it and helping it and increasing their velocities and doing things. So honestly, it's just like being honest with people, being honest with like your customers and like what you're trying to accomplish. Not like, hey, I guarantee you 10 miles an hour. It's like, we guarantee you nothing. We guarantee you an opportunity to work hard, like, and get an opportunity to like be around people you like, and, learn cool skills and transfer those skills into a game that you love, essentially. So that's, what we're trying to accomplish. So that's what I would say.
Love it. 2 things there. You didn't say it happened in 5 days. You didn't become successful and achieve a lot in 5 days. So young coaches, athletes, understand, like, you got to do a lot of work every day for a long time before you get to reap some of the perceived benefits. You know what I mean? And we probably got to work harder now.
Yeah. I mean, I would say like the last, probably from 2008 to now, probably like, I don't know, 10 to 18 hours a day on a computer, like and then reading, like that's 7 days a week. There's like, like even if I'm traveling or on vacation, like I'm obviously trying to learn and help people. So it's, every day is just trying to do that as much as possible and just dedicating, your passion. Like I love doing this stuff. So, whether one person likes it or 100 people like it, 1,000 people like it, like that's cool. Like I'm just going to continue to try and help as many kids and coaches with overhand throwing and strength and movement as possible. So
love that. You saw a big void in an industry. You worked your butt off and you had a lot of passion about it, and now it's your job. So those few things, a lot of people could learn from that.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
No, thank you. You're just getting started. Like, dude, you've been around for a little while, and you've already blown up. You have so much more blowing up to do. Like you're just the same dude. You're still doing the same thing you're doing 7 years ago. It's just like you said, there's just more eyeballs on you, which we need. We need to get more eyeballs.
It was cool. Coach Murphy, actually at Alabama, was the first like college coach to reach out to me in 2012, and he's called me in my office in New Hampshire. I'm like, I knew he was, like, Pat Murphy. Or sorry, it's 2015. 2015, he called me because he called me. He goes, "Hey, I'm Pat Murphy. I won a national championship in 2012, but I'm always learning and I want to learn like high level throwing and what you're doing. And I was like I'm freaking out because I'm like, I know who he is. And obviously I was working with softball players, and he's like, would you be willing to, come down and talk to her? I was like, he's like, just come down. I'm like, I didn't know who he was. Like, I knew he was, but I'm like, let's go. I bought my ticket, flew down there, talked to them. And from there, he talked to, I think, Coach Wade Wilson at Texas Lutheran. And then from there, like Coach Tar at Washington started to implement it and use it and talk about it. And then all of a sudden it's like all these college programs, we work with Duke, we've done stuff with Ole Miss and Minnesota and Arizona State. And like all these programs are like, wow, like this is cool because everyone still needs help throwing, even at that elite level. So that was, kind of a cool thing, that even though the elite players like seem that they can throw, there's still some kids that need help, and that's okay. Like we're not knocking them. It's just giving everyone else an understanding. Like if you take care of these patterns now and you focus on them at a young age, like you can get there and focus on other skills, hitting and, other things. So once
Speed
you
of the
own
game.
your pattern, speed of the game, for sure. Speed of the game. So, yeah.
Coach Austin, amazing. Please let my listeners know where you're at on social media platforms. How do they even go about connecting with you, products or live events?
Sure. Yeah. So everything is on highlevelthrowing.com. We have clinics where we go out to locations. We work with rec leagues, travel programs, high schools, colleges, where we implement high level throwing and teach their athletes, the coaches, good fundamentals and some of our dynamic position specific advanced concepts drills. And we have lots of free information, like free download ebooks. We have our high level throwing warm-up books. We have our high level throwing flagship baseball edition book. So there's a lot of content on that website where you can dig through and find some stuff that might be right for you. Some of our youth strength books, and you can always reach out to us on social media: Facebook, High Level Throwing, Instagram is High Level Throwing HLT. We're on Twitter, we're on TikTok, we're
everywhere.
We're just want to get the information out to people that are searching for information. And that's like what it's always been about. Like it's not about like having a facility and just having a facility to have a facility. It's been about having a facility to create content and specialized knowledge to share with people. So that's like what it's, again, always been about, whether it's facility based or like online remote training and digital products. So but yeah, you can check us out on those platforms and highlevelthrowing.com.
Amazing. I highly, highly recommend everyone go out there and absorb all of his information. Coach Austin, keep doing exactly what you're doing. We need you to help us all out. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to having you back on.
Same here, man. Can't wait. Thank you again for having me.
All right. Take care.
See ya.